From our State House studio in Montgomery, I'm Todd Stacy. Welcome to Capitol Journal. Today started early and ended late as the Alabama Legislature met for the 12th day of the 2025 regular session. There was also a full slate of committee meetings as lawmakers try to get their bills in position for passage. Our coverage starts in the Senate, where lawmakers voted to move forward with a plan to provide paid parental leave for public school employees and state workers. The Senate took up and passed Senate Bill 199 from Senator Vivian Figures. It would grant up to 8 weeks of paid leave for new mothers and 2 weeks for new fathers. Figures brought up similar legislation last year, but this time the bill is gaining momentum with the backing from Governor Kay Ivey and support from the Alabama Education Association. After a successful 28-3 vote, Figures said this legislation is long overdue and that she was thankful for the bipartisan support that it received.
It was very, very exciting. It was heartwarming. It was humbling. I truly appreciated all of the 23 co-sponsors from the other senators. It felt like it was a team effort. It was definitely the right thing to do. And I had no idea that that wasn't already in place in the state of Alabama. And I have to give kudos to my son, Congressman Shamari Figures, because he found out about this issue while on the campaign trail last year. And I immediately said yes. I'm very proud to have the governor in great support of this bill. So it's very important that that woman has that support. It's also a time that she gets to spend with the father, and they can bond. The father can help out in a lot of ways. So I'm very happy that we were able to get the fathers in. Also, for women who have miscarriages, and one of the problems was with some of the senators was that they wanted to make sure that they wouldn't be getting leave for an abortion. So I said, fine, let's put the language in there and make it very clear. So women who are 12 weeks or more and have a miscarriage, because they too go through a time of healing, particularly mentally.
That bill now moves to the House for consideration. 2 other bills passed the Senate today. Senate Bill 137 from Senator Jabo Wagoner would allow municipal water systems to fall under the jurisdiction of the Public Service Commission. And House Bill 230 from former State Representative Randall Shedd. It would allow prospective home buyers to have conversations with real estate agents or brokers without being forced into a contract. That's final passage for that bill, and it's headed to the governor's desk. In the House today, lawmakers took up a bill that would ban the use of cell phones in Alabama classrooms. Dubbed the Focus Act, House Bill 166 from State Representative Lee Hulsey would prohibit the use of cell phones of any kind during the instructional school day, sometimes called bell to bell. It would also require local school boards to adopt internet safety policies to address students' access to the internet on school computers. Lawmakers got a late start debating the bill, and because there were so many questions about it, the House voted to carry it over, to bring it back another day. Hulsey said she remains confident the bill will ultimately pass.
This is something, truthfully, that I have been researching for a little over a year now. And the data and there's a lot of data out there, but the data that was out there about how cell phones are negatively impacting our students in school when it comes to their academic performance and just their overall well-being and their mental health, it's really quite alarming, if I'm honest with you. So after seeing those things, I really felt like I couldn't in good conscience not do something to address the issue. There is a Montgomery school that has been implementing a 2-year pilot program. They spoke last year at our committee meeting, and then we followed back up with them this year because we felt like we didn't necessarily need to have them come back because the information was so good last year. But we did want to give some updated information from them. But essentially, their academic performance it's skyrocketed for the kids. But I think equally impressive is their discipline numbers have gone down over 80%. And when I say that, referrals to the Office for Discipline. So having to leave the classroom, not be able to stay in the classroom, learn, continue to focus on what you're really there to do. Over 80%, and that's a fabulous statistic. That's what we want to see. That's exactly what we're looking for.
Lots of committee action today, starting in the Senate. The Senate Judiciary Committee advanced a bill allowing prosecutors to seek the death penalty for those convicted of first-degree rape or sodomy of a child under 12. Under current law, first-degree rape and sodomy are Class A felonies punishable by life in prison without parole. House Bill 49 is sponsored by State Representative Matt Simpson, who used to prosecute such cases, and he says the death penalty option is needed. During today's committee hearing, Democratic senators opposing the bill emphasized that their objections stem from their opposition to the death penalty itself rather than the bill's intent.
It was originally filed under the age of 6. There was a bipartisan amendment that moved it to 12.
And if I remember correctly, looking at that vote count in the House, I think it was somewhere around 99-0 or somewhere.
I think it was 93-7. Most of the people that were opposed came and spoke as being opposed to the death penalty in general, not opposed to the bill for the purpose of what it does.
From an emotional standpoint and from how I would feel, the punishment meets the crime. But from a practical purpose, the punishment don't match the crime. I mean, because it's death.
I will have to vote no, but I did want to go on the record as saying, because you know how I feel about our children and about protecting them and the laws that I have sponsored and have passed on their behalf. So I thank you for bringing this with the heart to make sure people pay that penalty for doing such a terrible crime against our children, but I can't vote for the death penalty.
That would be something that the jury could make the determination as to whether or not they impose death or not. But, that's a factor for, it still has all the same defenses if you don't have the mental incapacity for those things. It's the same way as you would. There's no additional defenses through there. It doesn't take those defenses away.
That bill passed out of committee with a vote of 7-3 with 1 abstention, and now goes to the full Senate for consideration. The House Public Safety and Homeland Security Committee met today and considered legislation concerning illegal immigration. That included Senate Bill 55 from Senator Chris Elliott. It would make what are known as driver privilege cards, those are driver's licenses issued to non-citizens in a handful of states, invalid in the state of Alabama.
Senate Bill 55 deals with driver's licenses and basically says that the state of Alabama is not going to recognize licenses that are issued if the non-resident license explicitly indicates that it was issued to an individual who did not exercise the option of providing proof of lawful presence in the United States when obtaining a license. And so we have about 19 different states across the country that issue licenses that are specifically for folks that aren't here legally. And so what we are saying is we will not recognize those in Alabama. It's important to note, if you look on line 42 of the bill on page 2, that the penalty is a citation. And for those of y'all that are in law enforcement, I know we got a bunch of them in the room, it's a driving without a license citation. There was an amendment added in the Senate that says, look, if you're coming to Alabama to work, you are here legally, you may have been issued one of these licenses, but you have proof that you are here legally and you're coming to Alabama to work, then obviously that proof of being here legally will suffice, and you can keep on coming to get your Alabama license.
That bill advanced through committee and now goes to the full House. The Senate Education Policy Committee met today and considered legislation concerning the 10 Commandments in Alabama schools. Senate Bill 166 from State Senator Keith Kelly would require that the 10 Commandments be displayed in common areas of all K-12 schools and colleges. During a public hearing on the bill, there was both strong support and passionate opposition expressed by citizens. Supporters argue that the 10 Commandments go beyond religion, serving as a foundation for legal principles throughout history. But opponents say the government has no place in promoting religious beliefs, and they raised a novel question: which version of the 10 Commandments would be displayed?
Especially in the countries like the United States, the principles of the Ten Commandments have influenced the development of laws that govern society, prohibition of murder, theft, so on and so forth. In cultural aspects, art and literature, social aspects and movements, for example, Martin Luther King, in his work for civil rights, invoked the themes from the commandments, such as justice, equality, drawing parallels between commandments to fight for human dignity.
There are two different versions of the Ten Commandments found within the scriptures, Exodus 20 and Deuteronomy 5, and that is 300 to 400 words that whoever wrote this bill summarized and made a decision distinct of that. We believe that it's up to faith communities and faith leaders to interpret Scripture, and to each individual to interpret Scripture as part of their personal faith journey. But it is not the government's place nor the place of public schools to discern which words from the Ten Commandments are important enough to put on a poster.
No vote was taken on that bill following the public hearing. It will likely come back when the committee meets again. And here's a look at other notable committee action today. Senate Bill 116 from Senator Will Barfoot, known as the Glock switch ban, advanced through the House Public Safety and Homeland Security Committee. It now goes to the full House, where State Representative Philip Ensler is carrying it. House Bill 89 from State Representative Marilyn Lands advanced out of the General Fund Budget Committee. This bill would allow pregnant women access to Medicaid coverage up to 60 days before their application is approved. The idea is to improve access to maternal health care. It now goes to the full House. House Bill 177 from State Representative Ben Robbins would require parents who are covered under their employer's health insurance plans to enroll their children in those plans rather than insure them through Medicaid. It passed through the House Judiciary Committee and now goes to the full House. House Bill 363 from State Representative James Lomax would ban foreign nationals from contributing to Alabama candidates or political committees. It's a bill supported by Secretary of State Wes Allen. It advanced through the House Ethics and Campaign Finance Committee and now goes to the full House. And House Bill 297 from State Representative Jennifer Fidler. It would put a 4% fee on foreign wire transfers in order to fund local law enforcement and assimilation efforts in areas of high immigrant population. But that bill was carried over after lawmakers expressed concerns about the economic impact of such a fee on non-immigrants. There's a similar bill in the Senate. Okay, those are the highlights from a busy day here in the State House. When we come back, I'll sit down with Corinn O'Brien of Fight for Alabama Families to talk about the one-year anniversary of the passage of the IVF law and how advocates are marking it. Stay with us.
You can watch past episodes of Capital Journal online at video.aptv.org. Capital Journal episodes are also available on APTV's free mobile app. You can also connect with Capital Journal and link to past episodes on Capital Journal's Facebook page. And you can listen to past episodes of Capital Journal when you're driving or on the go with Capital Journal podcasts. Keep up with what's happening with Capital Journal.
James Withers Sloss started the Sloss Furnace Company in 1880 to take advantage of the mineral wealth of the Jones Valley. He built Sloss's first blast furnace the following year. A second furnace soon followed, and Sloss Furnaces produced 24,000 tons of iron in its first year of operation. Sloss Furnaces was an industry leader in innovation and design. Its superintendent of construction, James Pickering DeVell, led Sloss through a period of modernization in the 1920s that resulted in Sloss becoming the second largest producer of pig iron in the Birmingham district. A slump in the iron market took shape in the 1950s. Business began to decline, and pig iron was basically obsolete by the 1960s. Higher pollution standards finally closed the furnaces in 1970. In 1981, Sloss Furnaces was designated a National Historic Landmark and today hosts events, concerts, and a metal arts program. The site continues to stand as a testament to Birmingham's industrial past.
Welcome back to Capitol Journal. Joining me next is Corinn O'Brien, founder of Fight for Alabama Families. Corinn, welcome back to Capitol Journal.
Todd, thank you so much for having me.
It was about a year ago when we visited, and we are actually at the 1-year mark since this legislature passed a law addressing the IVF issue, in vitro fertilization. This came after that Supreme Court ruling that really shocked not just Alabama, but the whole country in terms of its impact on the IVF industry, on families. Really became the biggest issue of the session last year. And we want to get to that because you'll have an advocacy day coming up tomorrow. But I want to go back to that ruling, the Supreme Court ruling that happened earlier that year. Take me back into your understanding of that, because it kind of took a few days, maybe even a week, for people to understand that that ruling was going to impact the IVF industry in the way that it did.
Yeah, I remember that day well. It was Friday, February 16th was the day. That morning, I was 6 weeks pregnant after a successful embryo transfer, my first round of IVF. That morning, just to give you a little of my personal story of how I'm connected to this, is I'd gone to an ultrasound and learned that pregnancy likely would not be viable. It wouldn't be a pregnancy that would come to term. Okay. And then later that day, we learned about the decision. And I remember reading the news and realizing this is probably not good news for us, but we weren't quite sure yet what it meant. And that weekend, it was President's Day weekend, I think that holiday kind of threw people off. So my clinic, Alabama Fertility Specialist, didn't stop services to the following Wednesday. And I remember being in the middle of my office and reading the news and just kind of bursting into tears, realizing, like, first that I might lose this baby, and then second, that we would lose access to the only thing that would help us to give my daughter a sibling. And that week was just so tough on so many families that were in my similar situation that need IVF to expand their family. Either they were in the process or, so it was a devastating week. And that Thursday morning, after kind of clinics had closed, I think UAB had closed as also the day before, I woke up and realized, like, we needed to do something about this. I work alongside a lot of legislators and on a different issue, right, and knew it was important to get IVF families to the State House to tell our stories.
Absolutely.
And so we, that Thursday, kind of put together an email and just started kind of this grassroots kind of organizing, like, let's go tell our legislators we need to fix this. And by the end of that Thursday, hundreds of emails were going to legislators. And that was the day that Fight for Alabama Families was born.
Wow. I remember it. You're right that it was so organic. Mm-hmm. And not a lot of advocacy around here truly is that organic. Usually it's led by some kind of group, some kind of lobbyist, some kind of special interest. Not that that's a bad thing. I'm just saying this was unique in that you could tell that these were families, prospective mothers, mm-hmm. People that really had a stake in the game and really not connected to politics, not Republicans or Democrats. It wasn't a partisan thing, but it was, and so that's really stuck out and I think made an impact in the legislature. And I remember some of those days too, because nobody really understood for a minute, like, what are we dealing with here? Mm-hmm. Is it going to have to be, we're going to deal with this? I remember it was Representative Collins, mm-hmm. Who I saw at a lunch one of those days. She's like, yeah, we've got to go. Like, we can't wait. And so, and they did. So yes. they moved pretty quickly. There were different bills thrown around, but they eventually landed on legislation that solved the problem, maybe temporarily. Some people called it a Band-Aid. Yeah. Is that an appropriate term to say what the law passed?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say, and before we get to kind of that piece, I just want to say there was just one of the reasons we're coming back tomorrow is to say thank you. Thank you to the legislature. Thank you to leadership, Speaker Ledbetter, an early champion saying we need to fix this quickly. Senator Tim Melson and Representative Terry Collins getting that bill together, figuring out the necessary steps and working this through the process. And the fact that the legislature passed something in 5 legislative days, right? That's the shortest amount of time that you can pass a bill in our state. And it just showed this commitment to families. And so we're just incredibly grateful that that bill passed. I think on the same note, we do know it was a temporary fix. It was something we needed to do quickly to get clinics back open, and there's still more work to be done. And so that's some of what we're going to be talking about tomorrow. We still need permanent protection. You know, the law that we passed was challenged in court and could have been overturned. That lawsuit has been dismissed, but we anticipate other legal challenges. And the fact that we're one lawsuit away from, you know, a year ago again, where we had no IVF services for 15 days. Families in Alabama, we want more stability than that. We want full and permanent protection. And so we think this is going to require likely a constitutional amendment protecting access to IVF. And so that's some of the conversations that we will have tomorrow. We're not done. We still have work to do.
That's interesting. Well, yeah, you talk about lawsuit. It could go back to the very same Supreme Court that was the root of this issue. And, you know, if they were just voting consistently, it may be, you know, a big problem. Okay, that's interesting. We'll talk about Advocacy Day. What might we expect? You told me earlier it might be a lot of expectant mothers like yourself, by the way. I don't know if you can tell from the black dress, but you yourself are expecting. And so that's interesting because a year has passed and IVF has continued.
Yes, absolutely. So, you know, part of the reason we wanted to come back, we wanted to say thank you, is because of this quick action, over 400 pregnancies have been achieved through IVF. 400 across the state, including my own. And we hope to welcome a daughter in June, and we're so ecstatic. And that would not be possible. We're going to have several of our families here tomorrow who are also pregnant. We're going to also have some of our babies that have been born since last year. And so, again, we're just incredibly grateful. But again, the next conversation is, but we're not done. And I'd say the third thing we also want to bring up is, you know, a lot of discussion around IVF recently has been around, well, IVF is okay, but we need to regulate IVF. There's some groups that are talking about potential regulations of IVF, and that's another thing we want to address with legislators tomorrow. I think many of the groups that are talking about this are coming at it from a theoretical or abstract framework, and what we're talking about are real Alabama families. And if we go through some of their proposed regulations, that would increase risk for families, it would increase cost for families, we would have to be subjected to more medication, more hormones, more injections, more painful procedures, and we don't want that. That's going to drive Alabama families to pursue care in other states, potentially drive doctors from practicing here. Right now we only have 14 REI, or the doctors that support IVF, only we have 14 of them in our state. And so all of that, you know, we know our legislature wants to be pro-family, and so we want them to stand with us and to reject those regulations.
When you talk about regulations, what do you mean? I've heard of things like limiting embryos and eggs and things like that. I'm not totally familiar with the science, but is that the kind of thing you're talking about?
Absolutely. So limiting potentially how many eggs could be retrieved, limiting how many embryos could be created, limiting genetic testing, all of those things would affect standard of care IVF and would increase cost and harm and risk.
And so I can imagine some of those things, especially from the pro-life community, being very well intended in terms of, like you said, theoretical and ideological and spiritual kind of connotations. But what I hear you saying is that the science of IVF, that might limit doctors from practicing here. It might limit, you know, families from living here in the first place. If Alabama is a state that regulates it differently than another state that's, I guess, has less regulation and less cost when it comes to IVF.
Absolutely. And I think the other thing here just to remember is that these decisions were made between patients and doctors. A patient can feel like, I don't want to retrieve as many eggs. We don't want to create as many embryos. And that's absolutely decisions that can be made and are made in our state between patients and their doctors. We just don't want to impose that on everyone, you know, and make sure that that would raise the cost to other families if it's kind of across the board. Okay.
Well, we'll look forward to babies and pregnant ladies in the State House halls tomorrow. But tell me about the rally. What time is it on the State House steps?
Yes, on the State House steps at 9 a.m. We have Speaker Ledbetter, who's going to join us, as well as Representative Terry Collins to share some comments. We're also going to have a few patients and doctors giving a little bit, sharing a little bit of their stories. And then we'll move on to the 6th floor, where we will have Chick-fil-A biscuits for our legislators and an opportunity to visit with families from across the state who want to share their stories and say thank you and talk about the issues we've talked about today.
Well, between the subject matter and the food, I think you'll have a pretty good attendance. Well, Corinn, thank you for coming on and sharing your story. I mean, it is a very personal and emotional story, but so important, I think, to put in context what actually happens in legislation, so important like this. So thanks again, and we'll look forward to tomorrow.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Todd.
We'll be right back.
You can watch past episodes of Capitol Journal online anytime at Alabama Public Television's website, aptv.org. Click on the Online Video tab on the main page. You can also connect with Capitol Journal and link to past episodes on Capitol Journal's Facebook page.
The DeSoto Caverns is best known for its great onyx cathedral, some 120 feet high and larger than a football field. The limestone cave, roughly 3 million years old, has a long and fascinating history. It is home to a 2,000-year-old Native American burial site, and the oldest graffiti in a U.S. cave was a source of saltpeter for gunpowder during the Civil War and operated as a speakeasy during Prohibition.
That's our show for tonight. Thanks for watching. We'll be back tomorrow night at the same time, right here on Alabama Public Television. For our Capitol Journal team, I'm Todd Stacy. We'll see you next time.